Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the True Life Podcast. Hope everybody's having a beautiful day. I hope the sun is shining. I hope the birds are singing and the wind is at your back. And more than that, I hope you know that in your moments of consequence, in your moments of dark despair, that the world is conspiring to help you. If you just look around, if you take a deep breath, I promise you, you will see a sign that says to keep moving. Ladies and gentlemen, I have an incredible show for you today. A warm welcome, everyone, to our distinguished guest, Marc Viola. Marc's incredible journey is a testament to the power of curiosity and exploration. Having called India and China home for 8 transformative years, he's delved into the heart of emerging markets, driven by a relentless passion for technology and innovation. From leading digital teams at Tencent, China's tech giant, to shaping experiential digital campaigns at Ogilvy's Digital Lab, Marc has carved a unique path. His work extends beyond boundaries, aligning with the profound missions of MycoStories, ladies and gentlemen. MycoStories is an organization dedicated to harnessing the potential of fungi, particularly mushrooms and mycelium, for sustainable solutions. With a focus on research, education, and collaboration, MycoStories seeks to address pressing ecological, societal, and spiritual challenges. From growing meat alternatives to creating new medicines, sustainable biomaterials, environmental remediation, and expanding our collective consciousness. Fungi are at the heart of transformative solutions. Today, we are privileged to have Marc here with us, a trilingual globetrotter with a deep commitment to innovation for a greater good. His experiences in multiple countries and rich multilingual background reflect his innate curiosity towards diverse cultures and his desire to drive positive change. Marc, welcome to the True Life Podcast. Thanks for being here today.
Wow, George, what an intro. I'm feeling all that positive Hawaiian energy come straight through the Ethernet cables under the Pacific coast and where I am in Japan today.
You know, it's amazing what can transpire through those lines. You know, on some level, maybe we're connecting like the mycelium does. Even though we're so far away, I feel like you can really look into someone's eyes and their spirit a little bit, even though it's through this box that we're looking through. I can feel it, man. I'm stoked you're here today, man. Thank you.
My pleasure, my pleasure.
Fantastic. You know what? It seems interesting to me the way in which we move through life and your life traveling around the globe, being part of this giant technical revolution at the time you were, and now kind of branching off into this new chapter of the Marc Viola journey. Maybe you could talk about how that happened and why you decided to make this move. And has it always been a part of you? Or maybe you can give us some backstory there.
Yeah, so I guess I was fortunate to grow up in a variety of countries. My dad used to work in software, and so lived in Belgium, Germany, and the US before I was 10, French originally, but I was kind of lucky to have this baby globetrotter in me already.
Right.
And then as soon as I had the opportunity at university to work abroad, to do half of my master's study abroad, I picked India because I was studying business, and what better place to learn about business than in India itself. So yeah, in India, it was the beginning of, I guess, a truly, transformative, eye-opening, however cliche that might sound. Like, it was really like in your face. Cultural difference to, the nice European organized way of life. And I loved it. I wasn't ready to go home just yet after my year living in New Delhi, and had an opportunity to work straight out of university in Shanghai, went to check it out. And it was in a time where China was much more open than it is today. And so it really felt like going into the wild, wild east where everything is possible, And, I was in my early 20s, spent 7 years there, and, you didn't have to, no one really cared about the university studies you did. It was like, what do you know how to do? Can you drive this with a passion? And then go ahead. And if you're good at it, then you'll have a lot of opportunities that unfold like that. And I really love that, which is, it strays miles away from the France kind of fairly linear education to professional career path. And I really loved that. It gave me a sense I think I still carry today, that anything is possible if you put your heart into it, if you surround yourself with the right people. And so yeah, ended up being the only foreigner working in the Tencent Shanghai office, close to 1,000 Chinese people and me. I completely flanked my Chinese interview. I literally could not speak Chinese. They called me back. I was like, "Are you sure you're calling the right guy?" And they still gave me the job. They say you'll learn on the job. And I learned Mandarin in 3 years, and worked on some super exciting projects, from gaming to instant messenger, which was the tech before the socials took it all. Yeah, it was even in early brainstorming sessions on WeChat as well before it was launched.
Wow.
So incredible adventure that then opened a lot of doors for me. So very thankful for that. And yeah, I guess there is a certain je ne sais quoi about being a stranger in a strange land. So I've always enjoyed being out of my comfort zone, and I think you learn a lot from it. And I think the one of the many ways to do it is by living in a place which you don't call home and trying to call it home. And that's what I've been doing, for the past 18 years or so now.
It's wonderful. I think it speaks volumes of how people deal with uncertainty. When you begin at a young age to become familiar with territory that is unfamiliar, you're able to chart your course without the hesitancy that may be conditioned into you if you live this linear path of like being conditioned at a school from kindergarten to 12th grade. You live in this culture, you do this, you marry this. It's interesting to think about from that aspect of it, man. So I guess one of the questions that I've been thinking about for some time is, in your belief that brands can be agents of change through technology, what underlying philosophical principles guide your vision of leveraging technology for positive impact on communities?
That's a big question to
I
think
know,
for a
it's
lot of
giant,
time,
man.
George.
When else would I
I
get to
mean,
talk to you, man? I got to ask the good
I
questions.
know. So, look, I think first of all, the thing that drew me in technology was in the early noughties. Um, Technology, I believed, was still very much about let's solve problems.
Yeah.
How do we connect people? How do we give them a more comfortable life? How do we reduce the amount of time that they need for a given task so that they can enjoy more of family life or anything else? And I was really driven by that idea. Cool, okay, we're making people's life more enjoyable. And in the short, I'd say in the 10 years I worked in tech roles, I've really seen the shift from that to how do we monetize people's attention, especially working. I used to work for a big tech giant, and there was definitely the higher ideals are probably less perceptible there than if you're in a small startup that actually has like very committed founders and very visionary founders and so forth. So, that was the first thing that actually pushed me to, completely reroute myself, reorientate myself, seeing that, the the boat was kind of losing its direction. I was like, actually, I don't really relate to that. And I used to develop a lot of very innovative interactive campaigns for different large CPG companies, multinationals. And the problem is it was all a bit too shallow, and maybe just too much money spent for very little tangible results of
Yeah,
like, hey guys, like, are we impacting our communities in a positive way or in any way, like,
in any way.
uh, um, and um, and yeah, so that kind of pushed me to actually dedicate my whole life, which is what I've been doing for the past 10 years, uh, focusing on, my motto is, okay, what is the end consequence of my action in
Mhm.
the company I'm working for or in the project I'm working as a consultant for? And, this needs to resonate. And if it doesn't, it means you're not really working on the right thing here. And so going back to your question, I think that's something that, you know not only the employees within either tech or big brands or small brands should be asking themselves in their day-to-day work, like, okay, so sure, we still need to sell shoes, but how are we selling shoes? How are we making these shoes? um, and the more people ask themselves that question, the more the big brands, the bigger companies that really have the power to impact the lives of more than governments,
Yep.
the more they become agents of change. So they're more respected for what they're doing, the more they'll be um, particularly attractive from a younger workforce, which is actually really looking to working with purpose and impact.
Yep.
But it's hard to find these jobs, and it's hard to also make out what is honest, action focused uh, CSR, or corporate social responsibility, and then what is just another feel good campaign to put a little greenwashing coat and keep on doing like we've been doing for many years. So I think I worked in NGOs and big profit businesses and then startups, and we'll always need NGOs because there is community or environmental work that simply can't turn a profit, or it's so difficult that actually very few people will want to do it. But there's so much of uh, work which is currently done by an NGO, and the problems with an NGO is their balance sheet, their financial forecast, they go a year and then they stop because they have no idea what the next 24 months in terms of cash flow will be. But a business has that, so a business can really look into the future and plan for the future when it comes to implementing strategies that sure will bring profit, but also will bring positive impact on communities and the environment that they're actually producing their services or products into. So yeah, I've been consulting for a variety of companies, helping them in that journey, and it's definitely what has driven the force that inhabits me and making me feel good when I wake up in the morning to work. And Yeah, and I feel there is some change, but it's slow coming, too slow coming to my belief.
Yeah, it's fascinating to hear the way in which the evolution of profit takes over, and sometimes the changing definition of profit. Like profit can mean, hey, we're making this much money on this much project, or profit could mean, hey, look at this community beginning to flourish. And when we start looking at one of your new projects, MycoStories, I'm amazed at what can be thought of in a diverse group of individuals that make the world better. It's almost like a community is like its own little startup. And if you get an artist, you sprinkle in an artist over there, and a tech
Mm.
guy over here, and maybe an engineer over here. Like there's some real limitless possibilities that begin to pop up, and people start seeing the world differently. Has Have you noticed that in some of the places where you've been and seeing these communities that you're beginning to build?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what really drives me to this incredible space is, as I mentioned before, as we were kind of prepping for this interview, what I think is fascinating is that it's such a rich and diverse space that brings together artists, researchers, citizen scientists, foragers, and everyone's happy to answer each other, reply emails, pick up, quick phone call, cooperate on some projects. And that's the essence of a community is, okay, well, you've got this knowledge, I've got this knowledge, we all agree that actually we don't know much. So how about we start developing some synergies? And I wasn't in the Silicon Valley in the 80s, but I wonder if that was a little bit like that as well, where the Bosniak and all of the other, kind of probably talking to each other and, not necessarily being like, hey, wait a minute, like, sorry, this is confidential. So yeah, and I've really enjoyed. So the last few months I've been traveling, meeting a lot of these researchers, artists, entrepreneurs in the field of fungi, and these can be an artist in Indonesia who has been working the last 10 years with his sole body of work being fungi, both micro and macro. It can be a research project in university developing new ways to 3D print mycelium composite scaffolds. It can be an expert Japanese mushroom culture writer who's just published a book on the importance of mushrooms in the Japanese culture. So all of these people have one thing in common, is that they all understand and share this deep respect for nature that comes from mushrooms.
Yep.
And it comes from the realizations that they play such an important role in the development of ecosystems on our planet. The oldest mushroom is 2.5 billion years old. So talk about a story of adaptability and resilience right there, and yet that's also one of the things that kind of drew me in. They've been around forever. They're responsible for so much. You've got some right now in your gut, on your body. You're probably going to have some on your next pizza. But yet, I was taught so little about them. And I'm like, wait a minute, is this the biggest conspiracy theory ever? Like, and so that's what really drew me in. And as I learn about them, I think as everyone, the more seasoned, the Paul Stamets, the Merlin Sheldrakes, they're fully convinced. But there's, thanks to them, they're bringing a whole sweep of, new enthusiasts that are discovering through these fascinating organic beings that there's so much more we can learn from nature. We can inspire ourselves for nature. And so through this, there's a little bit for everyone. You're an artist, here you go. Not only you've got a new material to play with, but countless metaphors for creative expression. You're an entrepreneur, no problem. There's 100,000 mushrooms that we know, fungi we know, but there's an estimated 2.5 million that are yet to be discovered. So you're a researcher, you're working on DNA sequencing, like you've got a lifetime of work ahead of you. And during this work, you might uncover, incredible cures for diseases such as cancer, diabetes, you name it. That research is happening right now. And obviously, if you're the holder to that research, that's going to effectively uh, save millions of people from dying, or potentially reduce our dependence on animal protein and all the kind of um, animal cruelty that goes with it, then you can actually turn a pretty hefty profit from that. So hey, entrepreneurs, why don't you join in as well?
Come on in.
There's and so yeah, that's what I find fascinating. And because the space is so young,
Yeah.
Apart from the stamets and the sheldrakes and the niche researchers here and there, I would say it's only been about 10 years that we've seen an increasing amount of businesses and startups that have been kind of launched in this space. And there's, if we take the fungi protein industry, for example, which is another form of alternative protein, super popular, big business already, you probably only have one commercial success in the mycoprotein industry versus about 100 startups that have sprouted over the last 10 years. So there's so much more to do to support and enable these entrepreneurs to have access to the right resources, the right investments, in order to try and deliver on the promise that they've made to themselves and to some early stage investors. And so MycoStories is really trying to, not only in the alternative protein space, but in any innovative application of fungi, trying to develop an ecosystem that will effectively better support the foundation of a thriving new sector. And to do this, I believe you need loads of connections. You need information to be flowing just as it flows through the wonderful mycelium network. And you need a lot of education and awareness building, because regulators don't fully understand it. It's still complex. It's very complex. Investors, they receive about 100 pitch decks a week. So how do we make them already be a bit more acculturated with the difference between this or that fungi innovation, or how does it fit in an existing for impact investment strategy? So that's what MycoStories is trying to do, and we do this by connecting people, by showcasing the work of incredible projects and entrepreneurs in the space. And yeah, it's what's been driving me over the last 12 months. And there's worlds to do and many more people to connect.
I love it. It sounds to me like a story of abundance. Like there's an abundance of opportunity just waiting for us if we have the imagination to do it, or if we have the courage to just push through the comfort zone a little bit. There's a really cool story I want to share with you about my friend in Maui, Paul Lapau. If you listen to this, man, I love you and your team doing the myco remediation over there. There was a giant fire that took down Lahaina, and it's a when I say tragedy, I mean that in the most powerful sense. So many people lost their life, an entire town gone. But what people don't know after that fire is that a lot of the buildings there had lead in them. They had all these toxins. They were built a long time ago. And so there was never an EPA, or there was no real, sort of guidelines to build stuff. And so now they're sitting on like 1,000 pounds of ash that has toxins in there, getting ready to flow into the ocean during the rainy season. My friend Paul and his team, they have used these mycelium socks. They use the mycelium in there. They pack them on his farm, and they're using like the charred embers of trees to be a filter. And they have the ability to create miles of this sock with the mycelium being a natural filter and an incredible new way to filter water. But when it comes to government, hey, wait a minute, this isn't on the books. I don't know if we can do this. And like they're fighting this fight. It's like, What are you talking about? You don't know if you can do it. The whole community's behind it. We're building it now. We're bringing in teams of people from all over to build this, and you guys don't have it on the books. You know what I mean? It's the money's, we can't release the money. What do you mean you can't release the money? But when I hear you speak about it, and when I hear about innovative people coming together and finding ways to use this new technology to myco remediate or have opportunity, it's happening right now, Mark, right in front of, right across the other island from me, man. It's so impactful and beautiful to think about, man.
I mean, Paul Stamets was working and actually patenting these microfiltration strategies in the 80s. So it's been 40 years that we've actually known we can do this, and he proved like 90% reduction in the presence of E. coli, the bacteria, and it's been out there, but there's I've mapped out the whole ecosystem of fungi innovation companies on mycostories.com, and you will identify that there is so few companies that are actually investing in mycoremediation practices, bioremediation practices, because fungi, they like to be well surrounded, so they work really well with other types of bacteria. So, it's not all about the mushrooms. There's only I'd say less than 5 companies globally that are developing commercial projects leveraging fungi to depollute, remove toxins from our soils or our waterways. It's still, it's so small. How can it be? So let's get more research, money, regulators to understand the power of this thing, and let's scale this up.
Yeah, I do know. I'm excited for it. When we look at MycoStories, and you've spoken a bit about how it's focused on harnessing the transformative power of mushrooms and positive impacts, but maybe you could delve into the philosophical implications of using nature's resources to address ecological, societal, and economic challenges.
Small question, George.
You know how I do it, Mark.
Another one. Look, I think actually very recently I was working on an eco lodge in West Papua in Indonesia, and the person who set up this project, when he arrived on the land, which is literally a little cove between a pristine coral reef and a primary rainforest, just setting the backdrop.
Yeah, beautiful, man. Beautiful. I love
it. So when he arrived, it was just like, a shack. And he told me this beautiful thing, which resonates to one of the founding principles of permaculture, which is, he arrived, he sat, and he watched the land understand how it worked and what it wanted. And it's kind of like based on that he started understanding. He sat, he didn't meditate for 6 months. Obviously, he was on preparing other aspects of his project, but he looked at the way the rainwater was flowing. He looked at where were certain types of plants growing better than others, and it's really by taking to nature, looking at nature, and trying to work with it as opposed to impose the human dictatorship on it, that 5 years later he has probably one of the most lush, rich permaculture garden, which is nestled between this primary rainforest. It's called Raja Ampat Eco Lodge. Check it out. And I think that's a beautiful and simple example of why we should really focus on bio-inspired solutions, to rethink a lot of our supply chains. And there is a movement, a growing movement, and it's I think it's not only gathering attention but investment, and it obviously still needs much more. Like I often get asked the question, oh, but why why can't we match the prices or the characteristics of polystyrene packaging or plastics with mycelium-based composites? The reality is, in much of our developed economies, we spend the last 80 years with the brightest mind, hundreds of thousands of them, optimizing the shit of a non-bio inspired economy.
Yep.
And so we actually need that amount of headspace to do the exact same thing, focusing on bio-inspired solutions. And so there's still a lot of time. And, obviously I could say we don't have a lot of time, but, Mother Earth will be fine.
Yeah. Yep.
We won't be, but she'll be fine. And so, yeah, I get very stimulated when I speak to other people in the space that are, similarly to me, trying to either they're in the trenches, developing the companies themselves that are focusing on, looking at algae, looking at the way animals migrate, for example, to inspire themselves and inspire, or, there's a fantastic fungal analogy as well that uses where Tokyo researchers effectively looked at slime molds to design, even though they had designed the Tokyo metro already, but they replicated a Tokyo map where they put like the largest areas of Tokyo as little oat flakes, and then they put a slime mold in the center of the agar plate that they were working with, and within 24 hours, this slime mold had recreated an almost perfect representation of what the Tokyo metro looks like, and I think this is a fantastic analogy of like, hey, let's use nature, let's inspire ourselves with nature to think about regenerative design, think about urban planning, think about transforming our food system. And the great thing about it, and it's really what riles me up every time I get to speak or I see a mushroom on the forest floor, is nature is super fascinating. And it's like, the more you learn about nature, about understanding ecosystems, the more every time you take a walk in the forest, on the beach, in the park, suddenly you're not just a tourist, but you're actually an active component of this ecosystem you're interacting with, and you understand what you're seeing. And it's I guess it's a little bit like going to China and speaking the language, and understanding that when people are yelling to each other, it's not because they're rude, or it's not because they're having a fight, but it's just they're actually having a very passionate conversation, but you don't understand it, so you're just like walking by and kind of missing the 90% of the sunken interesting aspect of what is actually happening here and what's happening beneath our feet when we're walking in that forest. So yeah, let's get inspired, because not only it's full of potential solutions, but it's actually super interesting as well.
I love it. It speaks to the idea of awareness. I was reading an article a while back. I forgot where I read it in, but there was a college that opened up, and they had opened up this beautiful new wing of campus, and they had all the buildings done, and the concrete contractor was like, "Where do you want these sidewalks?" And the guy's like, "Wait, we're not going to pour the sidewalks." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "We're not going to pour them until after the first semester." And after the first semester, there's all these walkways where the kids had gone, and it's the same way the slime mold creates the network under there.
I love it. So smart.
Yeah. Exactly. It's interesting to think that when you say that it's an ecosystem, I think taking mushrooms or just sitting in nature gives you the understanding that you're part of that ecosystem, and you can watch the ecosystem unfold all around you. The same example you gave of that gentleman who was watching the land. so
Yeah.
too can you watch nature unfold by your own habits in some ways. It's interesting to think about supply chains and the way. I often wonder if, when you get a globe and there's all like the supply chains on that little globe and it shows you where they're going, it kind of seems like a neural network to me in a way. And,
Yeah.
wouldn't it be interesting? Of course, we're going to build it like it's in our heads. Like that's how it's in our heads. We're going to build it out there. It's
Yeah.
crazy to think about the fractal nature of it. What do you think? Is that too crazy?
No, I mean, I'm all with you, George. You know where to find me.
I do know where to find you, man. I'm excited you're here. Let me see if I can pull out another giant question for you to
All right,
solve the world's problems here.
Hit me.
Okay. Okay. Fungi play a crucial role in sustaining ecosystems and have vast potential for sustainable solutions. How do you perceive the significance of fungi as architects of the natural world and agents of change in modern life? We've covered that a little bit, but agents of change in modern life, the architects?
Yeah, so, as I mentioned, we believe that the first plants on Earth were actually brought by symbiosis between algae and mushrooms, probably around 2.5 billion years ago, where, kind of morphing into lichens, and lichens and mushrooms having an incredible capacity to develop enzymes that can break down solid rock. There's very few organic things that can actually do that, right?
It's crazy.
And so through that process, and being able to adapt to a very high CO2 environment a long time ago, it enabled the apparition, the first plants on our planet, and then the story of evolution keeps on unfolding, and mushroom obviously play a huge part because they help to decompose all of that natural waste that sits on the forest floor, and so I think already they are, it's a beautiful story of them being the architects of life. And it's not scientifically proven, but I generally love to talk about Terence McKenna's stone ape theory, who, I don't believe it's necessarily too far stretched. I think if you've had a truly life-changing psychedelic trip, might it be on mushrooms, on psilocybin mushrooms, on or other psychedelic substances, you will remember something that happened to you, and you'll remember it crystal clear, and you will understand that something happened in your brain in that instant, that if happened repeatedly over a number of years, I believe could have the potential of, providing a bigger or different type of awareness, especially in a brain where nothing much is happening. If we're going back, I think Terence McKenna was looking at 500,000 years ago. So again, talk about the architects of life, human life as well. And even if his theory is correct or not, I think that psilocybin mushrooms have still played their role in the development of certain cultures and beliefs, and has shaped communities in Northern Africa, in Latin America, in Russia, and yeah, I mean, I think the fact of being able to, through this organic substance, having an elevated state of being, will definitely push you to take the right nature inspired solutions, because generally it connects you to that, uh, not the opposite. So I think both in this kind of ethereal and spiritual way,
Yeah.
as much as the very tangible, actually, they have been adapting with the changing environments of the last 2.5 billions of years. I believe they are kind of the unsung heroes of the evolution of life on this planet.
I love it. In so many ways, like when you talk about the ideas of McKenna or John Allegro's The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross, or one of my favorite, I really like to listen to or read the books of like Saint John of the Cross or Mircea Eliade, and these people that these mystics that have this mystical experience. And it's interesting that these incredible incidents that happen, like Mircea Eliade talks about the terror before the sacred. And anybody who's found themselves at the height of a psychedelic trip knows what that is. Like, oh, like you're in the presence of something so beautiful. You want to pee your pants, but you're afraid of it, but it's so beautiful. You know what I mean? And it's like, that is a spiritual experience. That is getting to touch the hand of God. That is the burning bush. That is where inspiration comes from. That is the ineffable. That is where, oh my gosh, I'm part of this giant organism. And when you can have that in you, you can really be inspired to create great arts of work and dig down deep and find out what's beautiful about relationships. And I can't see, obviously I don't have a PhD or something to back up why I think they played a giant part in the idea of spirituality, but I think anybody who's found themselves in the midst of a psychedelic trip like that cannot deny that connection of like, you are part of this thing. And when we start looking at the words, like in the Christian literature, they have like, you eat the Eucharist, you eat the flesh of God. Well, I think a mushroom is pretty close to the flesh of God if you get the right one in there. It's the story's beautiful,
Definitely.
man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's an idea about language. Like we've spoken about it a little bit when Terence McKenna and mushrooms and somehow language. What do you think is going on when, if you're at a startup, you're trying to come up with a shared vision to create a product? If you're in a government, you're trying to come up with a shared vision for the people. And sometimes you can, that mushroom allows you to have that shared vision. What's going on here with language and building, whether it's ecosystem or products? There's a similar vein there, right?
Yeah. Trying to decipher which angle to take on this question.
Okay.
Dial it down for me again.
So in a heightened state of awareness, usually on mushrooms or fungi, I think you rub up against a situation that words can't describe. And I think that is the same thing that happens when you come together with a startup. You have a vision, but you can't describe it. So I think that those two things are similar and they can come out the same way, right? Like it's our job to bring together symbolically this vision and then create it in the community.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind is also what I found the most transformative under psychedelics is the complete loss of ego.
Yeah.
And I think that's in itself the most powerful experience someone can have.
Yeah.
And it's transformative in so many ways. And generally it pushes you to be so much so much kinder to others and so much more relaxed about your own purpose on life. And I think in some way the startupper who is trying to talk about his vision, who is stressing out about trying to get access to the right financing, talk to the right people, hire the right team, if he removes his ego out of the equation, he's probably going to be able to, I think, achieve his mission in a more honorable way, and yeah, potentially a clearer mind.
Yeah.
You know, I being an entrepreneur myself, I always have this voice in my head that's, the voice of doubt. It's
Yeah.
the entrepreneur's worst enemy, and it's always there. And a wise friend of mine once told me, you know, stop listening to your head, just listen to your heart.
Mm,
And I think the head is the ego speaking, and you need to reduce that to as subtle a sound as you
yeah.
can to focus on whatever your mission is. And I think through that, you'll be able to communicate and articulate it in the clearest way possible. Um, and I'm not saying,
Yeah.
have a macro dose of mushrooms before you enter your investor meeting, but, maybe once a year, have like a,
Yeah.
a very good trip that,
Yep.
maybe mix this with some meditation,
Yeah.
um, and uh, and you'll be a better man, better woman for it.
Yeah. There's something to be said about the perspective shift you get, and the ego too. Like when your ego is just hammering with you, and you just there seems to be a misalignment when the ego is running the show. But
Mm.
psychedelics tend to find a way to balance that. And what do you think about the idea between balance and psychedelics? It seems that it does provide us a balance of like what is important. Maybe the reason I have all these health problems is because my life is out of balance,
Mm. Yeah, I mean, it's recentering yourself on,
Yep.
what you really need in life, and um, and the things you need most, actually, they're fairly intangible, and they're about connecting
Yep.
with people in the flesh. They're about building valuable, supportive connections. And obviously, there's a few, material things out there to support comfort. But I think, the increasing rates of youth depression that you see
Yeah.
in the West and in the East,
Yep.
I think it's because there's been an imbalance on what young people are focusing their time on trying to achieve, or yeah, trying to surround themselves with. So you know social media is an amazing tool, but it's a tool, and once again, it should be, it can be used in a great way, or a quite harmful way. um, and and I think the connections, the over exuberance of the ego on social media is a great example of, just drop the ego,
Yeah.
and drop your social media account, or connect with it 5 minutes
Yeah.
or less every day, um, and you'll be better off for it. I mean,
Yeah.
again, it goes back to what I was saying about tech companies. Is like, Instagram is great, but why does on my feed, I don't see anything from my friends? It's like suggested this,
Yeah.
promoted that. It's like, I don't want all this. So
Yeah.
so I just use it to basically put the word out there, showcase the heroes of the fungi innovation space, and then I'm out. You ain't getting more of my attention.
I wonder if Facebook or one of these social medias left alone could be like the slime mold on the agar plate of Tokyo. Like if we just put it up there and watch the way people connected, might that be the best way to set up like a social? Obviously, you might not make a ton of money at it if you're not suggesting stuff, but we might be able to learn from that. I bet you we could even look back at some of the first Facebook models and be like, look at all these people connecting. Isn't that wonderful? Like this is the people really coming together
Yeah,
to share stuff. Before it became, look at my salad, or before it became, look at my hot fudge sundae over here. It's interesting
yeah,
just to see how that plays out like that, man. It kind of blows my mind.
yeah. I think, unfortunately, the harm is done to some extent. So,
Yeah.
like, we now have a preconceived notion of how you use a social network,
Yeah.
and if you launch a social network without the likes, it's just not going to do well.
Mm,
And it's because that's why we go to the social network. It's because we're looking for a little endorphin shot.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's built. And I think, there's a lot of people who are kind of tuning completely away from it. So again, it's kind of that bipolar.
Yeah.
Um, you're either all in or all out.
One of my favorite philosophers, Alan Watts, he's got this cool lectures that he talks about, and he talks about the difference between the East and the West. And one of the funny things he says is, in the West, if you go into the center of town and you tell people, I'm God, they might arrest you or take you to like a funny farm. But in the East, if you go to town and say, listen, I'm God, they say, congratulations, you figured it out. And I'm wondering, you as a builder, as someone who has kind of bridged that gap and moved in between these two different cultures, how do you use what you've learned in these different cultures to build and work in some of these communities that you're going to?
Yeah. So again, going back to something I said earlier, I truly believe that in every action I take, developing MycoStories, reaching out to someone, deciding if I want to speak or showcase that person, that project or not, it's always like, okay, you know, am I adding value? If I'm sharing knowledge, am I actually sharing knowledge that adds value, or am I looking for attention? And then I'm actually taking something from you
Right.
instead of giving something to you. And I think Yuval Noah Harari, the writer of *Sapiens*,
Yep.
said the 20th century was the century where knowledge was power. The 21st century, it's all about clarity. Do you have the capacity to sift through that giant pool of knowledge? Because actually, knowledge is not power in the 21st century. Knowledge is mind numbing.
Yeah.
Knowledge
There's so much.
is it's blinding. And so, do you have the time, the headspace to be able to discern and focus on the right knowledge, what adds value? And you'll see in everything that I might have published
Yeah.
on mycostories.com, there's always a work of research. There's always a certain intention which goes beyond um, going for the viral video because I know that's what's going to drive engagement. And sure, I need to um, I guess sacrifice a little bit of that growth, but again, it's kind of like the guiding principle, things you don't want to stray away from. And
Yep.
so I guess it's what's driving a lot of the interactions that I meet as well. I try and meet with people that I feel, at least, you easily get a sense of someone's righteousness or
Yep.
someone's energy
Yep.
after even exchanging a few emails or after 20 seconds on the call. Like, you're like, okay, I think that's a good egg.
Yep.
And yeah, I think I'm really using, I guess, the experience of having worked in a variety of places, traveled in a number of countries, both in big business and tiny microfinance NGOs in Uganda. So, and all this helps to bring a certain social wisdom that I hope I can leverage for the greater good of the people who are engaging with MycoStories.
Yeah. I'm excited for it. I really think that we find ourselves on the forefront of change right now. Sometimes I look at there's a great book called The Fourth Turning. And in that book, they speak about the different generations and how the generations affect the following generation. And, you know, it's interesting to see that a lot of the people that are in leadership positions are moving on to the next level, whatever that level is, and the ideas are being handed down on somewhat. And I think with MycoStories and a lot of these new technologies that are being ready to be born, there's a real opportunity to change the future for a long period of time. Are you positive on that change? Do you see that forefront of change as well, or how do you see that shaping up?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I love the idea of slightly flatter organizational
Okay.
structures where everyone has more agency.
I like that.
If you are, if employees were all the primary stakeholders
Yes. Yep.
and the primary shareholders of their company, I can tell you, companies wouldn't be managed the way they're managed. And best example is, being in Japan. This is the Japanese kaizen, the organizational structure where they might not be the most productive uh, in this year, but they're planning for the next 10 years.
Right.
And so that, some people debate about, whether it decreases productivity to operate like this. But, it's an interesting Eastern capitalism,
Yeah.
if you may. And so, yeah, so I believe in, giving more ownership to the employees of a company, having flatter organizational structures, and this will inherently lead to, I think, better ways of doing business. And through these better ways of doing business, hopefully you have more fulfilled employees. You have a community that takes a bigger role in the strategic decision making of the higher echelons of the company. Um,
Yeah.
and then hopefully you also have a variety of third-party organizations that are network builders, like MycoStories, that are, you know,
Yeah.
helping to also lay the foundations for these companies to thrive through, broader awareness, access to contacts, and the investments that these companies might need to succeed. When you put impact at the same level of profit, some investors might see this as, slower return on their investment. And so, we need to try and strike a balance where, sure, in your portfolio, you do have a lot of pure for profit, but, maybe dial that needle up on the impact a bit
Yeah.
more, like, and actually, if you have a life that focuses on fulfillment through intangible means, maybe you don't need to have 10% and you're happy with 7. But that's not the way, most investment strategies work today. And, I'm sure a lot of investors won't want to talk to me after saying this, but, it's how I believe. There's a lot of people out there who believe the same way. And I think it's the only way we're really gonna change things. Stop looking at our belly buttons and move forward without keeping on stepping on our toes. And that's it for the metaphors for today.
I love it, man. It's, you know, maybe we just need to maybe people just need to redefine what investment means. Maybe investment is more than a monetary return. Maybe investment is having a better future for our kids, or getting to see an ecosystem evolve and be part of that. Like, now we're talking about a real legacy, putting something in place that will sustain someone for a lifetime. That's a legacy, man. Like, the yacht, I'm sure, is awesome. I don't know, but it seems like a yacht might be pretty awesome to have. But might it be better to have stories told about you for generations about how you started something like that? That sounds like a little bit better legacy to me, right? What do you think about when you
Definitely.
think about legacy?
You know what? I try not to think about
Good.
it because I think it's potentially parasitic to think too much about your
Yeah.
your legacy.
Yep.
I try to focus on what I do in the very, you know in my day. Am I doing
Yep.
something that feels right or wrong? And then if through that I have a great legacy, then great. I do think, probably at least once a week, at myself in the rocking chair when I'm 90 years old, and that's kind of what I think. And I'm like, okay, um, are you, no regrets? Are you proud of what you've done with all that time on this planet? And you know that's it.
Yeah, I love that. Sometimes I speak to a lot of different people that find themselves, investigating the world of mental illness or mental wellness and mushrooms in the medical container. It's interesting to see how that might be helping us solve problems with addictions. Do you have any thoughts on the idea of psilocybin in this medical container?
Psilocybin in the medical, so you mean psilocybin in clinical conditions for
Yep.
super
Yeah, versus maybe the
diseases and
traditional
such?
model. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm all for it. To be fair, I probably have more examples of people who have been unable to take the right dose and just gone way too much and
Yeah.
just be like, oh, this is not for me, or um, and and that not only with psychedelics but with cannabis as well.
Yeah.
And so I believe that um, if we want to give a new reputation to psychedelics and to mushrooms and to their healing um, capacities, it needs to come from a medical background. And I think, think of my mother directly,
Yeah.
who's got some depression issues. Like, she's now considering it because I've been telling her, no, it's medical research, it's getting approved in this state and that country, um, and only this will kind of give her the trust that, okay, I'll give it a shot. And because it's going to be in a clinical
Yeah.
context, hopefully not entirely for profit. So there might need to be some, I know the US hates that, but we might need to regulate this a little bit, put a little healthcare government intervention here. um, that's is what is going to help my mother and the many other who suffer from depression or other mental health diseases. And if you only stay on the spiritual,
Mhm.
the way mushrooms have been revered to and embraced by the fringes of society, I think you're unfortunately going to prevent a lot of people who could benefit from it if it was a bit more institutionalized, but
Mhm.
who still have the fear of like, oh, I don't want the magic.
Yeah.
I can't handle the magic.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. There's a saying that says when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And maybe that teacher
Hmm.
for everybody is different, right? Maybe that teacher is in a clinical setting for some students, and maybe that teacher is in a ceremonial setting for some students in different communities. And
Yeah.
what do you think so far has been the best part about starting MycoStories?
The best part about MycoStories has been, one, my own deeper understanding of ecosystems,
Love it.
and the real natural ones. I
Hmm.
didn't, I don't have a scientific background, so I'm just reading heaps on, you know, how a forest works and how your intestine works,
Yeah.
and I think that's been really fascinating, delving in the world of the micro.
Yeah.
You know, for someone who's never been a researcher or a biologist, like there is a world on my arm. Um, so I've really enjoyed that, and then it's the sheer amount of incredible conversations and meetups that I've
Yeah.
had the pleasure of doing, and what that has brought me, and seeing that again, through uh, ancient organic
Yeah.
living being, people all over the world reunite and celebrate it and innovate with it. And I get contacted by people who are developing mushroom farms in Nigeria, who are developing microdosing supplements in Taiwan, developing alternative mushroom-based leather in Mexico. I mean, it's, and it's happening all over. So, but they've been unsung for way too long. So I'm here to, um, praise them as much as I can, and help their greater development in our society.
I love it. There's something to be said about shining a light on the positive aspects of community in the way that helps us grow. Maybe not only grow, but gives us a model to look at. It seems like there's so much goodness out there. What I didn't even know about these leather farms in Mexico, or
Yeah.
the blow up in Nigeria. That's interesting. Like what? So we've got the leather farms in Mexico. What are some other unique ideas that you've heard about recently since you've begun on this pathway?
Yeah. There's some really interesting work being done in the University of Northampton, the
Okay.
University of Bristol as well in the UK, where Dr. Andrew Adamasky, who works at the Unconventional Computing Lab, he's working on effectively using fungi to replace uh, motherboards for computers.
Whoa.
So effectively trying to use the conductive characteristics of certain fungi to try and, again, not necessarily replace, but potentially augment or create a new type of computing engine. So that's one example. There's many more of them. You can all check them out, read them on your bedtime, on mycostories.com, on socials, and on the web.
It's fascinating to me. Mark, I'm so stoked on your time, man. And I really love talking to you. And I hope everybody listening to this goes and checks out MycoStories, because it's like a encyclopedia of awesomeness where you can go in there and find hey, I like artists. I'm going to go look at Dennis Walker. I'm going to go look at this guy over here. I'm going to go look at this, So
Nice.
I think it's a really great foundation for people to go and reach out to you. And I'm thankful. And I know a lot of people in this community are thankful for having someone shine a light on all the things that are happening. And I think the more we work together, all of us in this community, the more we can promise a better tomorrow for the next generation. And there's a lot of promise out there, man. And everybody can be part of it, right? Anybody who has an idea can be part of the team. They just got to go over to MycoStories and start finding their way through there. Does that sound accurate?
Definitely. Yeah. And you mentioned Dennis Walker, good friend of mine. So shout out to him.
Yep.
Go check out Mycopreneur as well. Great compliment to the content I've been putting online.
How funny that guy. I probably cried 100 times watching that guy's skills. Like, everyone is the best one. Everyone gets better. I don't know how he does it.
Yeah. It's epic. Well, it was amazing speaking to you,
Yep.
George. Really appreciate it. And let's reconnect for round 2 in the next couple of months or years, man.
Guaranteed in the next few months. And if you find yourself out here, I'll reach out to you. But before I let you go, though, where is the best place people can find you? Can you give the name of the site again? And what do you got coming up?
Yeah, so mycostories.com, MycoStories on LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, and reach out to me on LinkedIn is probably the best. Marc Viola, and what's next? 9 more months of travel, and working on some cool projects along the way, and trying to grind this all down for all the fungi enthusiasts across the globe.
All right. Well, hang on briefly afterwards. I'll talk to you real briefly afterwards. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your time today. I hope you have a beautiful day. I hope the sun is shining, and I hope that something great's about to happen to you. Trust me, it is. That's all we got for today. Aloha.